And okay, so we're going to drop in now to our next speaker now that we're back in our bodies. If you want to give it like a little shake, a little breath. Yeah, beautiful. Love that thing. And this is going to be an amazing talk. I actually have never met Adrian. She's one of the only speakers I haven't met, her and Reverend Brianna Lynn. And I heard her on Amanda Bucci's podcast. And when I heard her, I was like, oh my God, yes. Like all of this, everything that you're saying right now. Maybe some of you know Amanda Bucci. I know Elizabeth does on here. Yeah, it was just so amazing. And so she is going to talk to us specifically about stepping into our truth, stepping into boundaries, and the cost of not doing that and not having clear boundaries, and how boundaries is an essential part of freedom. And so with that, Adrian, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to Emergence. You have the whole floor.
Dope. Wow. What's up, guys? I actually see a couple familiar faces, so I'm just really thrilled to be here. I actually took a break from teaching on boundaries over the last 6 months because I needed some time to really settle into some of the new boundaries that I was being called to set in my own life. And I'm really excited, to share with you guys today as practical of a framework as I possibly can. This workshop, although I never teach it the same way, can be a very confronting workshop. So I just want to let you guys know that, because I know y'all are coming out of a meditation and a sound bath and settling in. And a lot of what I'm going to share with you today, it's going to ping different places within the mind and the psyche, sometimes dark corners of the psyche. And it's going to be very confronting, because the reason why we have such poor relationship within the boundary world is because boundaries are all about taking radical personal responsibility for the part that we play in every single thing, every interaction. Even if we're, not doing anything in that interaction, we're responsible for our interpretation of that interaction. We're responsible for the energy that we consent to. If someone that we love tells us something and it doesn't really sit right with us, but we go ahead and intake it anyways and internalize it and then allow it to become something that is really not meant to be with us, you can see where this would lead to. So to give you guys a little bit about, how I got into this work, my biggest kind of awakening moment where I started to realize that so much of my energy was being just leaked out. In human design, I'm a generator, so I can pull energy from pretty much any source. But when I didn't have boundaries, and because I never was really taught boundaries growing up, which is an essential part of learning about the parameters in which we can operate safely as children, because I didn't really have that, I also grew up very controlling. So not only did I not have my own personal boundaries, I am a boundary overstepper. I am the person who has a really, really hard time hearing no, and just letting no be no. And I would poke and prod and manipulate the people in my life to get what I wanted. And so with that, boundaries are a two-way street. Again, it's all about taking responsibility. And when my dad died, when I was 23 years old, I had a group of friends that were so incredibly unsupportive of everything I was going through. And they were a complete and total reflection of me and what I was willing to give to others and how I was able to receive. And I just remember like having, I don't know how many of you guys have had like a very macro trauma in your life. We have micro traumas every day, right? So little things that ping us, that re-traumatize us, but a macro trauma, which is what the whole country is going through at the same time right now. The whole world is going through this at the same time in different ways. And for me, losing a parent was a huge macro trauma for me. It surfaced a lot of questions about what really mattered. That's kind of what kickstarted my like spiritual, philosophical journey of wondering what there was in life that was more than just, I want to get my way and I want it done this way. And I'm going to continue to, bulldoze over people to get to the place that I'm trying to get to and become an outcome. And very quickly, I got into a relationship with someone who had absolutely no boundaries. And I started to notice how much, one, we were codependent. Codependency is that's a reflection and a physical manifestation sometimes of just how much we don't have our boundaries with another person. And so when I got into this relationship, I could feel how much I was bulldozing over this person, and they didn't have the ability to speak up and to really use their throat chakra and to say, hey, like the way that you're engaging with me actually makes me feel incredibly unsafe. And we either need to figure out a better way to communicate, or I'm going to have to withdraw myself. we didn't have language like that. So what would happen is I would overstep, he would withdraw, I would then get pinged within my abandonment wound, and then I would poke, and I would become incredibly anxious. And then that pattern would play out over and over and over again for the next 3.5 years until our relationship disintegrated. And as a lot of you guys know, being parts of this community, of a conscious community learning, I'm sure that a lot of you are doing self-healing work. A lot of you are doing some type of conscious evolution work. And in that, it's a lot. You take on a lot. This is a really big job that each one of us is doing, and we're doing it to impact, the future generations that are coming into this world, and to create better frameworks than the systems that have been created for us. So one of the things that I began to notice when I was doing, the beginning of my boundary work, was starting to see that I was a chronic open looper. I had a lot of scarcity in my life. And so what would happen is it didn't matter what got presented to me. Anytime that an opportunity came my way, I was a yes girl, because I was afraid if I said no, that I would miss out on the opportunity, and then my entire life would crumble into pieces. So I'm hearing some of you like, yeah, I relate to that. And what I started to notice is that it was like, as scarce as I was, I had an abundance of loops open. And each loop that I had open, and loops can be so many different things. And the way that I explain it is like, I'm in the center, and very much like what any virus looks like. It has all of these little legs coming out from outside of it, right? And each one of those legs was an area in life that I allowed to influence how I showed up and what decisions I made. So this can be my parents, obviously, friend groups, my partners, my job. And then there's a whole well of unconscious legs on the, inside of this virus that we're all plagued with, which is that we want to be validated in all sorts of ways that we're not even aware of. And so it's hard enough to do the work of what we are aware of. Then we start to dip into the realms where we're not aware. And for me, I started not even being able to count the amount of loops that I had open and the amount of things that I was allowing to influence me. And so if you really think about yourself, sovereignty and personal authority, you become a pillar. We all know that person who's incredibly grounded, and it doesn't matter what you say to them, if you try to compete with them or if you try to get under their skin, they're very much just, yeah, if that's how you feel. But it's authentic, it's embodied, right? The rest of us, like, as much as we'd love to be able to say that to our parents when our mom comments about how we fixed our hair that day, and we're like, it's none of your fucking business how I fixed my hair. But it doesn't ping like that, right? Like we can't change. Energy doesn't lie. And we can't lie about our energy, and we can't lie about how other people's energy affects us. And we can't lie about how our energy affects another. There is a level of responsibility, and boundary work is all about knowing where your parameters are, where you end and where another person begins. So when you are able to stop taking responsibility for another person's emotional experience, but take responsibility for the experience that you co-create with that person, you really become a master of this work. And so each of you, I just want y'all to, right off the top of your head as we're going into this, and a lot of this I'm going to save for Q&As. This is super, super important to be able to relate to relatable stories and to be able to work with you guys on a more personal level. But I want each of you to just think about yourself being the central pillar, being so grounded between the earth and the stars, and knowing that as your feet walk on this earth, you know the next step. You trust your body. And as you continue to take each step, you are connected to the central power sources within this entire universe, which is the sun, right? That's one of the greatest power sources that we have. The fact that it is a giant ball of fire that continues to burn and burn and burn and burn for whoever even really knows how long. And the fact that we are able to receive nutrients from that. We're able to strengthen our immune system from that. We're already pulling so much energy from that one power source, obviously food and all these other things. So we're talking about renewable resources and resources that are stable. Some of us, if any of you are doing work around masculine and feminine, you can call this the divine masculine, the constant space holder, the one that is there no matter what the earth is doing. The sun shows up every single day, and we're allowed to pull energy from that place to ground ourselves. And so when you sit in that authority, which is very hard to do, and then all of a sudden what happens? Something outside of yourself tells you, you need me. You do. It's just something that you need. If you get this job, it's the only way that you're going to be able to get to that coaching career that you really want to get to. You got to have finances first. Nobody's going to believe in you if you do this. And all these different voices that come from where? they come from the stories that we are built in relationally. They're built through trauma. They're built through the limitations of the people that pass down the conditioning to us and education and all of that. And so again, it goes back to how many different legs are pulling on you. And you look at a year like last year, 2020, and this year, 2021, and you already have your kids are pulling on you. And, you're thinking about getting that degree that you think that you need in order to show up in your power. And you've got somebody else that's dying over here in your partner's family, and you want to be there for them. And then, oh, by the way, all of COVID happens. The economy starts to change. You're getting fired from your job. And you look at why the entire world is disassociating and shutting down, and it's so incredibly hard for us to stay within our personal autonomy, is because there's too many loops open. We've said yes and consented to too many things. And so this game of consent, which I feel like should be one of the very first things taught to the children coming into this planet, and it's just not. We don't understand how we consent to things, right? And so today I just want to talk to you guys a little bit about that. And really the most practical thing, if you don't take anything else away from this entire workshop, because I'm going to give you guys a lot, and it's a lot of words. Those of you that have done this with me before, you know this dance. I'm going to provide as much language as I can, and whatever you guys want to take with you, I'll be there in the DMs on my Instagram to answer any additional questions. But the most practical thing that you guys could take away from this workshop is to close, I hope I'm allowed to curse on here, those motherfucking loops. Every single thing that you are saying, all right, sure. No, yeah, that could be fun. I'm down. Everything that you're doing that with, stop doing that. Because what you're transmitting is, I am available for what is mediocre. And that transmission will continue to create your reality because we live in a mirrored reality. So the most practical thing that you guys can take away from this is to close everything that is not a full yes for you and allow yourself to sit in the discomfort of the space in between what was not for you and what is on its way to you. Massive spiritual teaching there. Okay, so one of the things that can be really powerful about boundaries is, actually, let me start with what we don't want to do with boundaries. There's a lot of confusion about boundaries when we think about like, yeah, I'm going to stick it to them. I'm going to let that person know. And so one of the things that boundaries are not for is to create forever walls and rules or to gain any type of control over another person. If there is the undercurrent of punishment, which is one of my favorites, I love to punish and withhold love from a person that I deeply desire to connect with because I'm in my wounding. It is not a way to disconnect from your triggers or from looking at parts of yourself that need attention. I know some of you guys are like, I don't fucking like this workshop. Why did I do this? I can see some of your faces. It's wonderful. It is not to punish or to teach someone a lesson. It's not to prove a point. If you are in the energy of trying to prove a point, they need boundaries from you more than you need boundaries from them. So with that, boundaries are actually not about anybody else at all. Boundaries are an energetic game that, yes, can absolutely show up on a very physical level when the metaphysical is very messy. So for instance, if you have a lot of entanglements in your life and you don't have a safe environment to process all of those entanglements, meaning all of the different ways that you feel pulled by different things and you're not capable of naming those things, and so you're kind of just pulled wherever, and then you end up shutting down because you really just can't process it, though that type of energy entanglement will become more and more dense over time, and it will show up physically in your life. Like you guys will see it. It's like your entire environment around you is a representation of what's going on in your inner world. And so boundaries are not to keep you separate from others. They are to keep you close to yourself so that when you actually connect with another person, it is authentic and it is in reciprocity. Reciprocity being what we can bring to this entire collective universe that we live in and be in the most reverence and honor of it. Every single person you come in contact with, if your first question is, how do I become in reciprocity with this person? Over time, you won't even have to think or ask that question. Your energy will naturally flow in that way. So what boundaries are, if they're not all of those things? If boundaries are not a way to win and to prove a point, what are they? They are an opportunity to be a sovereign nation within yourself. They're an opportunity for you to meet your own needs and to learn how to self-regulate, even if you were not able to co-regulate with a parent as a child. They're an opportunity to take radical ownership, because until you stop blaming every single thing around you for your circumstances, you are going to live as a victim, and that energy is going to continue to perpetuate your cycles and prove to you that you are not worthy of the things that you say that you want. And when you say that you want something, but you've got 99 million things on the table that you haven't said no to, energy doesn't lie. So boundaries are all about energy. They're all about energy. They're about taking radical personal responsibility for the part you play in every energy dynamic. We are all in a great power struggle with somebody, something, some circumstance constantly. And if you think you're the victim, well, the other person thinks you're the villain, and it goes round and round and round. And I'm in one of those power struggles right now. I always like to be super, super honest with you guys. Like, I live, eat, breathe, and sleep boundary work, because I have said, yes, universe, I would love to teach the people something that matters and something that is so great. Please make me a relationship coach. And then the universe was like, okay, cool. Well, I'm just going to fuck you up over and over and over again until you really get the point. And then when you are able to translate this to other people, they will receive it. Thank God that I have the perfect environment to do all this work in. And that's a huge part of my boundaries as well. So boundaries are all about acknowledgement over suppression. When we suppress our power struggles and we are not able to sit with ourselves in the part that we play and take radical ownership for every single interpretation, every judgment, everything that is going on in our field, then we continue to suppress our level of empowerment and our feeling of like, it doesn't really matter what anybody else does. I know exactly who I am, and I'm going to do what I was called to do. And when I do that, I'm going to transmit the frequency of looking for other people who are on that same path. And when you get a bunch of people together who don't really give a fuck, but they're there for purpose and to serve, and they know exactly who they are, we're gonna innovate, and we're gonna be able to save this planet, because we are in a really, really rough place. And so this boundary work is essential. The reason why we have such poor boundaries within the earth and how we treat her is because we bulldoze over these parameters that we were never taught to set for ourselves. And we are the earth, we are nature. So this is just such a beautiful reminder to all of us that this is the work, the baseline foundational work that will impact your relationship with nature, your relationship with your partners, your children's ability to step into who they're supposed to be and who they came here for. And for you to just have fucking peace, just to have peace from all of the darkness that continues to erode at the desires and the love that we get to experience with other people. So I want you guys to take a moment to really feel into these words. If you can close your eyes, potentially, and really just allow yourself to feel the resonant vibration of these words to set something into perspective. Each time that I say a word, I want you to feel where that word pings in you, and I want you to feel how open you are to allowing yourself to feel the full radiance of what that word is moving through all of your being. The first word is purpose. Freedom, self-expression, connection, commitment, discernment, detachment, sustainability, regeneration, safety, and authority. Those are some powerful words. And no surprise, the number one thing that they all have in common, they all require boundaries to get to. So boundaries, creating clear parameters and space to process what you need to process on an emotional level. Boundaries are not just, this thing that should have happened to us in childhood when, maybe one of our parents was like, no, you're going to hug that creepy uncle that you have, whether you like it or not. And all of a sudden our entire authority over ourselves being able to say, don't touch me. I do not consent to engaging with you. It's like, you don't have that choice, child. You don't have that choice. You will do what I tell you to do because you need to listen to my authority. You don't have self-authority. And when we see that on a physical level, we're like, oh my God, that's so fucked up. Like, that's not okay. Yet, what's happening on an energetic level all the time? How many times do you hug somebody that you don't really want to hug as an adult? Even if you like that person, sometimes they just don't want to be touched. I don't want to be touched. And I don't want to touch you because I feel like you want to be touched and you're a nice person. And so I don't want to cross, like, you know, get in this, I don't want it to be weird. And so like, I'm just going to hug you even though I don't really want to hug you because it's fine and like you're safe and whatever. And every single time that we engage in something like that, we completely diminish the power that it is to say, everything that you need, you're allowed to have. And if you can't figure out what it is that you need, you're allowed the space to figure that out. And if you are in that space and somebody comes into that space and your number one goal is, I got to figure this out, and that person can't understand or give you the space for you to process how you need to process, now you're going to be playing into karma. This is where codependency happens. This is where we continue to perpetuate cycles from childhood, and we don't allow each other the space to really grow into who we want to become. And so boundaries are 100% about building self-trust. This game of self-trust that it's not like a sexy thing we can package up, you know, the way it is like, let's get fit. You know, I used to be a fitness coach. I used to run people through nutrition programs, and it was like the highlight of everybody's job or, you know, and day if somebody came out at the end of a program with like ripped up six packs. And then I just watched all of those people create binge eating disorders, and they still were able to keep the abs, but then the binge eating got out of control, and then the antidepressants, and then it just cycled and cycled and cycled, so on and so on. And I started to actually feel the boundary of like, I'm not available to work for somebody who's going to come in here and do that, and then they're going to be even worse off than they were before, because that makes me feel like shit about myself, and that rubs up against me feeling responsible for you when you hire me to be your fitness coach. So massive shift for me in the coaching industry when I shifted over into working with people on shadow work and boundaries and inner child healing and conscious relationship work. I had to drop the part of me that was like, I am responsible for getting people there. No, I'm not. And even if somebody said, I would love for you to take me there, I can't consent for you, and I can't take back consent for you. It's an in-house job that only we're responsible for doing. And that's where that really, really deep work comes in, where we start to realize, fuck, I really need a boundary in this area. And every single time that I have an interaction with this person, like I'm left feeling very drained and also feeling a little bit like, I didn't really empower myself. And so now I have to take responsibility for why am I doing that? Well, there's a deep story that needs to be unwound. And that story very likely is going to relate back to scenarios with mom and dad, where we either didn't feel in our authority or they gave us too much authority, and then we got hurt. And now we can't trust the boundaries that were there. So in the boundary realm, you typically have children who are kind of create their boundaries one or two or three ways. I got this from the book called Boundaries by Henry Cloud. You guys can download it. It's 100% a religious context book. And if you have any old wounds with the church, it is very, very hard to get through. But it's an incredibly beautiful book about boundaries. And in that space, when I was really starting to learn about that, it was able to help me really gain self-trust when I was able to get around some of those concepts that were happening. Sorry, I lost my train of thought on one of the things. So if any of you guys want to write in there anything that you feel like I'm missing, I'm just kind of going off of the flow that I created for this. And I'm going to get to questions here in just a little bit. So when we can start to begin to notice that boundaries are really needed. Oh yeah, the book is called Boundaries by Henry Cloud. Where we can start to look at on a physical level where boundaries are needed. And to be honest, sometimes we're so spun up in our stories and we get confused about whether we're trying to create a boundary or if we're just being a dick or if we're trying to control, and it gets confusing. Trust the body, because the body is going to show you what you're embodied in. And it doesn't really matter how much intellectual knowledge you have on creating boundaries. If every single time you create a boundary with your mother, your nervous system fires off the story that you're going to be completely and totally abandoned and left in the dark, you're going to have a really hard time actually applying that boundary, actually enforcing that boundary. And so it can be really tricky. So the number one thing that I would say is honoring your boundaries for nervous system regulation. One of the signs for me personally, when my nervous system really gets out of whack, is I start to sweat, and the sweat glands that are responsible for or that are stimulated by stress have higher proteins in them. I can literally smell my body. It's a very, very clear indicator. I'm like, whoop, my nervous system is off the chain. My breath becomes shallow. Who here knows that the number one thing that you can do to be the most embodied person in the room is be connected to your breath? Who here is a chest breather? Shallow breaths right here. You don't even get into your diaphragm. You wouldn't even know the edges of your boundaries because you never feel them, because you never take your breath deep enough to know what's really going on. It's a beautiful lesson, a beautiful opportunity. So checking in with the nervous system. Anytime you got an energy entanglement and you're trying to do the right thing and you have no idea what's up from down and you don't know if you're wrong and you don't know if they're wrong and it doesn't really matter because you just feel fucking exhausted, that's a great opportunity for boundaries. I call that lost in the sauce. When you become so wrapped up in what your partner's doing that everything becomes about micromanaging them. When you notice that you're living in your stories and projections and that it doesn't really matter what anybody else is going through, you can't see past yourself. Call that narcissism, but we all have lighter forms of it, right? Anytime that you are in a state of anger, rage, disappointment, or overwhelm, all of those emotions are nice little indicators of where boundaries should have been, but were not, or they were. And yeah, being micromanaged is totally terrible. I'm a micromanager and I can tell you it is terrible. I feel so bad for my partner. We have conversations about it on a weekly basis, working very, very, very hard on this. I tell you guys, I live, sleep, breathe, eat this information. I'm very, very embodied in the boundary work. And a huge part of that is my commitment to this dance. And so, yeah, that's the information that I want to share right now to let you guys digest, because I kind of channel a lot of information through and it can be quite meaty to digest. So what I want to do is give you guys the next 3 minutes as I get a drink of water, you get a drink of water. You kind of sit with the biggest takeaway of this workshop and ask yourself, where's an area that you could apply this to your life and see if there's any confusion, resistance, struggle, or if any of you guys are just like, you're like, everything that you're saying is just resonating so deeply with me. I'm on this path right now with a very specific person or situation, and you feel really called for to share that vulnerably with everyone. The more context you give without taking up too much time, because right now we've got about 30 minutes left. And if I'd like to spend, no more than 5-ish minutes on each person, and then I can take about 5 people. Give yourself some time to figure out if you're the person that wants to share and be really vulnerable, share as many details. If you come on and it's very ambiguous and you're not really wanting to share the dirty details, your energy field is going to be closed, and I'm going to feel that. And I'm not going to want to reach into your field and try to pull information for you because you're not consenting to that. So that's just something that I ask right out of the gate. If you're very open and wanting to share with the group, I will actually help you kind of untangle that entanglement within whatever is going on within that energy. And then anybody that I don't get to today, feel free to send me a message on Instagram and I'll send a voice memo back with just a little bit of insight on anything that you're experiencing. So for now, I'm going to give you guys just a couple minutes, 2-3 minutes max. I'm going to get a drink of water, and it looks like my computer is not actually charging while it's on the charger. So I'm just going to switch to my other device, which is already on here. And then we'll take it in the next couple minutes. Cool? Awesome.
Thank you. Let's see. Ellison, are you able to put on some background music for a few minutes through your computer sharing? It didn't work on mine. And if you're not able to, I think I can try. Okay, let me try. Oh, he's doing it. Yes.
Avatar Vidmai Satgurudevaya Dhimai Tanno Babaji Prachodayate.
You guys, wrapping up, about 30 seconds left.
Avatar Vidmai Satgurudevaya Dhimai Tanno Babaji Prachodayate.
All right. Welcome back. Cool. So let's open up with somebody who has a share that they would like to, add into this experience, into this workshop. And if there is nobody who's interested, I have my own boundary story that I can share with you just from this morning, fresh and hot off the stove. Cool. Mickey King, I see you raising your hand. Why don't you pop on?
Okay, so could we just clarify a little bit more what boundary we're going to dig into? And I love being vulnerable and available for myself, first of all, so that I can be for the rest of the world. So exactly, could you articulate a little bit deeper of what we're digging into?
Yeah, you mean just in
Just
context,
right now,
we're not.
Yeah, and then as soon as you let me know where to go, then I'll dive in with you.
Yeah, so you're just looking for some direction. Yeah, so why don't you share with me any area of your life? What's the number one area of your life that continues to pull energy from you? And energy, in a way that's, it's like it's kind of draining you.
Yeah, that's a great place to look. So probably my biggest area that draws energy from my life force is like continuing patterns of self-doubt and lack of self-worth. And on one, it's such a dichotomy because on one level, and I'm like a duality of, I got it. I'm a king. I feel this. I'm that. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. But on the other side of it, I'm just like racked daily with negativity and patterns that will hold me back. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I do that sometimes. Okay, I'm back. The first place I like to start when that's happening, please make sure everybody else is muted because a couple of y'all's faces keep popping up. So everybody but Mickey right now. First place I start is getting really, really clear on what the pattern actually looks like. So it's going to come in a cycle. And since it comes in a cycle, there's a power struggle. You mentioned duality. There's two sides of it, right? I feel like an absolute piece of poo and I feel like a fucking king. And what we want to understand is what feeds that loop, what feeds both of those and what creates the oscillation between it. It's clearly a very heavy, pendulum swing from one side of the spectrum to the other. We are beings of polarity, which is so beautiful. We get to experience the spectrum and our free will, which is a huge, huge part of boundaries, is when we get to choose where we want to really settle and stay grounded within that spectrum, what has the most resonance. So what you're experiencing right now is the phase where you're kind of in the chaos and you're taken for the ride. You're not really sure, what the pattern is, or if you are, you have not yet created a disruption of that pattern. And so it can feel very chaotic. And that's kind of the part where we start to look at we get hopeless and we just feel defeated. And it's just I'm just round and round on the merry-go-round. And that's the invitation for personal responsibility. So first, tracking the cycle. You can start here. I can tell you guys that where a cycle that I have within my relationship is that my partner, he has a daughter with another family. And anytime that he misses his daughter, then he usually will go see her. And then we will have this pattern where he goes to see her. And that pattern would be very clean if it wasn't for the fact that in the beginning of our relationship, every single time that he didn't want to deal with something difficult within our relationship, he would use the excuse of, I'm going to see my daughter. And he wasn't aware of this, but it became very out of integrity because now his daughter was being used in this pawn as a way for him to soothe and to kind of disconnect and disassociate from the situation that we were in. And when he would do that, then he would come home and he would feel shame because I would not be where I need to be in the commitments within our relationship. And then the power struggle would swing to the opposite side, where then he's like, okay, I'm not going to go see anybody else. We just need to reconnect and get back to where we were. And then we would do that and we would feel so fucking good. And then the peace would hit. And then there would be too much peace. And then he would crave chaos. So until we get to the point where we can recognize why we continue to attract this power dynamic that's playing out and what we actually gain from it, this is where it's really hard, because we look at these circumstances in our life and it's like, ugh, like this is such an inconvenience. Why does this happen to me? It's happening to you because you're gaining something from it. And so if you can look at your power struggle and kind of write it out, this is the work that I do obviously with clients. So I can only get as deep as I can with verbalizing, right, in the time.
I totally appreciate this. This is very helpful.
Yeah, getting clear on what that power struggle looks like, drawing it out and knowing what one side of the pendulum looks like and the other, and then the steps that lead you there. So let's say that you have this step where you start to feel like, oh, passion, right? Passion is the start of it. And then all of a sudden you go into a creative space, but then all of a sudden you feel the need to take action. And then when you go to take action, you start to feel overwhelmed. And so then you stay busy and you do busy work until you're even more overwhelmed. And then all of a sudden you feel so overwhelmed that you just completely withdraw from life. And then when you do that, you feel like I'm all alone. And then it starts all over again when something comes in. So let's say that you have that.
You're in my head. Obviously, you've been in my head.
Yeah, I can feel a little bit of something, but everybody's so different. So that's the first place to start. And then from there, it's so great whenever we're able to actually find the root of something, but sometimes we don't have that luxury. And sometimes it's, from a past life, if you believe that, it could be from a lot of different things in our blind spots. So the biggest thing is, regardless of if you can figure out where the power struggle is coming from, you want to know what you gain from that, what the story that's being fed is. This is something I work very deeply with people on, is to find the stories. And number two, you want to be able to disrupt the pattern before it gets to the kind of momentum peak area. So starting to identify where in the pattern it kind of slingshots you. If you can disrupt that process right there in the middle of that pattern, you create a new line of influence. And then from that line, you're able to create the boundary that says, I will no longer engage with this type of energy, because it's always a two-way street. So if you have any specifics in your situation with self-doubt or how it shows up in relation to another, that can be something that you'd really want to look at. And then maybe, since we've already taken some time to help you through this, you can think on that and then maybe shoot me a message and I can give you a little bit more insight on that.
That sounds wonderful. I really appreciate this. This is such a really just a beautiful opportunity. I love your energy. I love what you're presenting. And
well, thank you for sharing, Mickey. I appreciate you. All right, let's see here. We've got quite a few hand raises, right? Is that what we got going on here? All these hand raises?
Okay. Yeah, this is a popular topic.
Hell yeah, I love to hear that. And Chelsea, if we need to schedule a second one, I'm all game for that, because I know when somebody gives me only an hour, I'm like, okay, that's fine. It's usually 3 hours, but giving you guys this information. Okay. Chelsea, maybe you want to pick somebody, since you might know this crew, anybody who hasn't had a chance to share today.
We can go in order based on hand raise. So we have Gigi. I would also love to speak. Then we have David, Jessica, and Michael. I don't know if we'll have. Well,
Gigi, why don't you start with us? And if we have extra time to go over, I'm down with that. If not, then I'll get to everybody somehow. So Gigi, you want to take it off with it?
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, cool. So I have many fears, but the two big ones that are definitely affecting my life are this weird dichotomy of fear of failure and fear of success, just right in there. So with that, I have a pattern of circling the drain, as well as doing the things that I just end up settling for. And then I get into this pattern of, I guess, my body telling me in the weirdest way of getting me sick and saying, yeah, no, that's not what you're supposed to do. Figure it out. Do it all over again. So I just
I feel you.
I'm right I'm right now in a moment of reset right now. I've moved from to a completely different state back in with my family. Um, and I'm trying to start a business, but at the same time, I'm scared to start my business.
Yes.
And because, you know, it's the thing where I'm doing something that I thought I would never do, which is become an entrepreneur, you know, doing my own thing, thinking I would always be like, you know, behind the scenes, but no, I need to be in the front of everything. So I'm scared
I
to let my
resonate.
light shine. Yeah, I'm scared to let my light shine, but at the same time, I don't want to be cowering in fear because I know I have a purpose of trying to get a
Yes.
message out.
Yes.
So, circling the
Yes.
drain.
Okay. So thank you so much for sharing. This is actually something that I wanted to share and didn't, I was planning if I had time. So what you're talking about right now is actually, we can only attract and manifest what we feel safe to actually experience. And for you right now, you're calling in all these big experiences for yourself, and your nervous system and your body are saying, I can't handle it. I don't have space for it. I don't have the level, like imposter syndrome starts to come up, and it's like, who the fuck am I to start a business and to do all these things and all those voices. And that right there, that's the stories of your nervous system and your cellular memory that is creating your reality for you. So I've got such dope fixes for this. They're free, they're easy, and most people don't do them because they're not super sexy and all packaged up nicely. And when you're adjusting and resetting your nervous system and regulating your nervous system, depending on how far you get into your pattern, that's why it's important to disrupt before you get into, like the pattern of like complete and total withdrawal, like disassociation where you're staring at the wall. When you get to that place because you're just in analysis paralysis, you've gone too fucking far. And the best thing that you can do at that point is to get your feet on the floor, get it in the earth, try to change your state with as little of things that drop your baseline dopamine as possible. So things like earth frequency, crystals, breathing, reconnecting. But if you can start to be a master of disrupting that pattern that you're talking about before it gets to the point of like no return, we'll call it, one of the things that you can do that I highly suggest for everyone to learn and to teach their children is EFT, which is the tapping. Tapping is, and I don't know all the science behind it, and I'll save that for you guys to do your own research. But tapping is where you connect the meridian points on the body, which is the extension of the nervous system. It's the nervous system that feels subtle energies and communicates to the nervous system what's going on. We call it field speak. So when I enter a room and I go and engage with you, before we even talk, our energy fields are having a conversation. And obviously you know this because you can look at somebody and just like not like them, right? Or the opposite can happen. So you being able to tap on these meridian points, which they start on the top of your head, and allow yourself to have the experience of, I am now safe to process what I was not safe to process before that created the story that I'm living in. I am now safe to process what I was unable to process before when I was experiencing trauma that's creating the story that I'm living in. And tapping, and there's a lot of different meridian points. You can look them up on YouTube. It's very easy to find. And I can also give you guys sources. When you start doing that, what you're doing is you're taking power back from a moment where you felt powerless. So the felt experience is really what this life is about. And the reason why trauma and stories get stored in the body is because when we go through a traumatic experience, we internalize it. We don't really have a society that supports temper tantrums. Like, it's like most people don't even want to bring their kids out in public when they're in their toddler years because you get side eyes when your toddler's having a meltdown, on the cereal aisle. And like, that's very normal. And in fact, adults do that every single day too. We just have a lot of masks and justifications around it because we don't feel safe and worthy to just have a little bit of rage come up, have sadness. And then when we talk about grief, it's really hard to get to. So boundaries for you are going to look like being able to disrupt before you get to the point of no return. And then once you do that, regulate your nervous system from the story that's being told. Amanda Bucci is actually the person that really helped me set this into perspective for my business. If I'm about to launch my mastermind, when I launched it for the first time at the end of 2020, I literally felt like I was going to die. Like, it was like, I'm going to be publicly humiliated. No one's going to sign up for this, or people are going to sign up and then everybody's going to drop out last minute. And I actually ended up doing a psilocybin ceremony where psilocybin told me, this mastermind's going to fail. You just need to let it go. And it was in the letting go of that I was able to see how much I really wanted it, and to come at it from a really clean place where my attachment, where I was able to detach, right? We talked about that word earlier. And so for you, being able to, one, notice the truth of your attachment and feel the part of you that has the story about why that thing outside of you, entrepreneurship, that partner, moving back in with your parents, whatever it is that you're going through, why that is the answer. And if you're always able to discern, another word we talked about, why you're reaching for something, you can create the proper boundary that says, I reach for this because I do not feel worthy without it. So what I must do is I must sit with the part of myself that feels unworthy without it, the part of my nervous system that when I go to do this thing, I'm just like, oh, I feel hot and sweaty and I haven't been able to sleep at night and I'm having a really hard time and like definitely can't drink caffeine right now. And instead of your focus being on starting that next thing or what is that next step, it's the permission of sinking back into your center and saying, I have everything I need and I am a reflection of my inner state. So I will prioritize my nervous system and my needs so that when I create this business, my business is a reflection of me prioritizing my boundaries and my needs. And your business will literally become the safe haven for you to create the abundance that you want inside of the parameters that you so choose. So one of my boundaries when it comes to sharing on online virtual things, I do not like knowing questions beforehand. I don't want to send you anything about what the workshop is going to be like. I know where my creative genius is. I am a channeler and I can feel somebody's energy and know exactly what it is that they need to hear. I am very gifted in that space, and the cleaner that my energy is because I get to show up grounded, having done my ritual, knowing who I am, having cleared my whole day out and not needing to do any kind of tedious administrative work before I get on and I show up here to hold a safe space for somebody to maybe explore a dark part of their mind and a part where they don't feel like they're capable of being in their authority. That's very important to me. And because I show up that way, I'm able to really help people get somewhere. I'm able to reflect something that feels clean. So that's a priority that I have. And if somebody was to say, hey, I want you on this podcast, I'm going to send you a list of the questions, be prepared for them. And could you go ahead and send me also like what you're thinking about teaching? I would be like, oh, thank you so much for reaching out to me. I actually feel really honored that you would invite me onto your show. That means the world to me. It doesn't feel like it's really an alignment. The way that I kind of like to flow sounds like it's a different way that you like to flow. And what I'm doing is you can feel that I'm not attached. Imagine if I was like, oh, fuck, I need that podcast. That podcast is going to be what gets that one person to hear about me. And that one person is going to shoot me to that 7-figure business potential that I really want to be to. It's like, I don't need that. And as I say no to something, even if it's almost in alignment, now I get the opportunity to transmit. I will sit and I will take what I want, not take what I almost want. And then you start to really settle into that. And that's in everything you do, right? When I started integrating this with my relationship with food, game changer. Like if there's a dessert and it's not like a 9.5 or 10, it's a no for me. And I will wait. And now life is richer whenever I get that chocolate cake because I'm like, oh, they knew the exact way to do this piece of cake and the texture. And I'm like dancing while I'm eating it. And I'm having like an orgasmic experience. And everyone's like, is she okay? Yeah, I live a fuck yes all the time. And I transmit that and I attract that. And then my life just continues to be a series of all the things that I really, really wanted. But in order to get to that place, we must transcend all of the times we didn't feel like we could have that. And the stories living in the body that replay that story over and over again. So tapping is the number one thing I would suggest, all of that storytelling, just to get back to that point. I hope you guys really get it. And the second is really working with breath work. Our breath is one of the greatest teachers of boundaries. The breath never actually starts and stops the way that we think it does. If we are quiet enough and present enough with our breath, we'll notice that it's an oscillation that never has an ending or a beginning. It's infinity. When a inhale becomes an exhale, can you be present enough to feel the edge that it pushes in your stomach when it just continues to move around and fold back into itself and create that beautiful pattern that we exist in, that allows us to feel like, oh, I'm with everything. Everything is taken care of. There's infinite resources within the universe. That is a breath technique. And that technique looks like breathe deep, be present, and don't force your exhale. Focus on the inhale, connect to that part of your body. Notice when you expand a little bit more in that breath, that edge that says, oh, whatever it says. And then just allow the exhale to fall away from you. So those are two of the things that I would be doing to really make sure that you can be in that disruptive phase. And it sounds like the number one thing that I could really suggest to people is like close down your loops and get your nervous system regulated in when it is feeling overwhelmed to be inside of an experience that you deeply desire. When desire meets a story, it creates contradiction. And then your field feels like this. And then obviously not a lot happens. They call that energy neutral, sometimes energy depletion. Did you feel like that answers your question?
Yes. So I basically need to do some more inner work to where I'm knowing my boundaries of yes, full yes, not just settling in between for the mediocre, maybe.
Yes. Close down your loops. Don't engage with things just because they're familiar. If they're familiar, they need to also be a fuck yes. And learn to regulate your nervous system when you're thinking about things that are a fuck yes, so that when those things come to you, you can meet them instead of sending them away.
Okay.
Start preparing the space for what you want right now, even if it's not there yet.
Thank you.
Okay, we have 7 minutes left. David, would you like to go? Yeah.
Hey, Adrian. I'm mindful I've got potentially a bit of background noise, so I hope I'm coming across okay on the mic. Yes, the location for me is there's a particular spot. I've got a blind spot, and it's around receiving like a directed, penetrating anger in my direction. And where that happens, it hits upon my idea of being a good person or something like that. And I notice my entire nervous system reacts to it. And so I don't have, my IQ drops, I don't have entire presence. And I don't know what to do except for either to try and mediate to soften things, which actually often enrages the other person or in that dynamic, or to exit, which is also for the other person a trigger point. So I'm thinking about my primary relationship, looking at this. So yeah, I feel like I'm dancing over the surface of something, and I would love to be able to just remove whatever it is that is blocking me to remain conscious in this place and be able to define and play there as well, like, you know, to turn that around. So yeah, I'd welcome any side.
Yeah, so just to clarify, it's when anger is directed towards you that pings something inside of you. And that story is, this person doesn't think I'm a good person, and now I must either mediate or regulate them to a place where I can perceive that they perceive me as a good person again.
Yeah, or exit the situation. And just to be clear, it's a particular type of directed anger. So I can hold space for people who are holding a lot of anger. And if it's not personal or it's not personalizable by me, then that actually is generative. I revel in that fierceness and
right. It's when it rubs up against one of your stories.
I've done something wrong, and it's directed at me for that. And my languaging might not be quite right there.
No, it's perfect. This is it's very hard to get the language of everything right. So the biggest thing is for you to begin to see the very specific scenario in which you begin to think this person perceives you a certain way. So the first thing I would be doing is, okay, so what does the scenario look like? And, you know, maybe you can tell me if it's very clear to you, like this is exactly what it looks like, how it is pinging you. So we want to know what that cycle looks like, because that's the beginning of your cycle. So everything is kind of easy peasy. And then all of a sudden anger gets directed at you. It feels personal to you. And then when that happens, it actually resonates with the anger inside of you, or the withdrawal inside of you, or, whatever that part of you that is, it's having a hard time holding that energy because it's karmically rubbing up against your wound. I have this with my partner. And the way that this looks is anytime that I'm in my princess shadow archetype, which is the part of me that wants to be rescued from all my trauma, my insecurities, and my fears. And when my partner is not capable of holding the space for me to say, I can't rescue you, but I'm going to be here physically so that you can move through this. And I know that you're going to come back to yourself. And even though I'm not going to intervene with that, I will be here in this house physically so that you know that I'm not leaving, because I know one of your deepest fears is abandonment. And when you're in this place, the worst thing that I can do is to leave. And so I'll be physically here. It would be so nice if he could show up that way every single time, except for some of the times whenever I'm deeply in my princess wound is when he's trying to go see his daughter. And then it's a real fucking nightmare for both of us, because as soon as he hears me not in a good place, and it doesn't even feel personal to him, but what it feels like is, oh shit, this might impact me going to see my daughter, which I'm not okay with. So I can't be in a softening and a vulnerable space for her, because if I do that, that means I'm not going to have my needs met, and I'm never going to sacrifice my needs to meet her needs. And so now neither of us can have our needs met while the other person does. So now we're having to choose ourselves. And when that happens, that makes, he will leave. And that makes me feel like I'm dying. Like when he leaves and we're in that place and he leaves, even if it's to go see his beautiful, beautiful daughter, it feels to me like I have been completely abandoned. This person does not care about me. And even though I've done so much work around this is an experience that I clearly felt when I was a child, probably when I was adopted. So when I connect back to that part of me that feels so horrible when this is pinging against me, I think to myself, what must it have felt like to be an infant and to feel so alone, so incredibly alone? So for you, the number one thing that comes to mind is grace and compassion. The number two thing to come to mind is, how are your boundaries when it comes to saying, like, what's your safe word, right? So like all of a sudden you're holding space and then that energy moves and it's a direct line to you. And now it's like, oop, tap out. Sorry. Okay. Time out. This just went from like super doable to I'm in my own experience. So now I do not have integrity to hold space for your experience. So this morning, perfect example of this. I came in the house. I cannot remember I just got off the phone with one of my girlfriends. And when I was in that space, I had all these ideas that were coming to me, and my partner was downstairs and he was doing the dishes, and I ran up to him and I started talking to him about what I was experiencing. And then, oh, by the way, that soap that you bought actually triggers a really weird memory for me. Could you not buy that soap anymore? And what he was feeling is, you just got off the phone. You didn't even ask me what I'm up to. I'm cleaning the dishes, doing something that I don't really enjoy doing. And all I can think about right now is getting this pan clean so that I can eat because I'm hungry. And wouldn't it be so dope if he could have just been like, hey, listen, right now in this second, I really just want to finish cleaning this pan so that I can eat something, because I'm not capable of holding the space that you potentially need. I don't even know if you need space help, but I know that I need to just hold space for myself. I would love to connect with you in like 20 minutes, but right now it's just a hard no for me. Imagine if we could communicate in that way, because now he takes full responsibility for the experience that he's in, which is he's washing the dishes, which is something he doesn't love to do. And he's really, really hungry. And so he's got to do all these things to get to the place where he can eat. He's practically an animal. He can't hold space for me, and he knows it. And so, in that place, like immediately he recognized he wasn't showing up, because instead what happened was I said something about how this triggered an old response for me traumatically. And I could tell that he was not paying attention at all. And all that I felt was, wow, you don't really care about this experience that I'm trying to share with you. I'm trying to be vulnerable about the fact that this soap is bringing up a weird feeling for me. And I'd really like to have a partner that could hold that space, or know that they don't have the space, so that they can be in integrity and say, I'm not capable of holding that space. You're going to have to do this for yourself, but I'd love to meet you at a future time. That is the type of parent, the type of partnership. Like, imagine if our parents had been like, I cannot do this with you right now. I'm not able to play with you, but I'm going to make the time to do that with you at this time. And I'll be there and I'll be really present when I'm there. That level of presence and consistency we didn't have that as children because our parents didn't grow up with any of this information. So with that, what ended up happening is he was very kind of dismissive towards what I said, and it hurt my feelings. And what I immediately noticed was like, wow, I don't feel safe in this exchange at all right now. And I really wish that you would just be more upfront with me when you don't have the space. And where's my responsibility? And in the future, I will be very aware of when I'm coming downstairs hot off of a phone call with all of this energy and just throwing it at you. I know that I do that very often. That's a tendency that I have, just to like kind of offload on the people in my life. And I know that that's something that's come up for us several times before. So I will work on that, and he knows what he needs to work on, and then boom, it's clean. We can move through these patterns as many times as we need, because another thing that happens is patterns are not one loop, they're a spiral. They're a spiral, and they will continue to spiral back and back and back as many times as they need to create. I know we're over time, so I'm about to be done. They will spiral back over and over again so that we have a metric for our progress, and we can start to see, this contrast that we're experiencing. So I hope that answers your question. I know that we're out of time.
You've muted. But while you muted, that was super good.
Okay, sorry. The thing I want to offer you guys as we're logging off is I would love to touch base with every single one of you that's on this call that felt a lot of resonance with it. I'm happy to, commit to a little bit of time to share voice memos with you, feedback on specific scenarios that you have, and share any free resources that I have. You're also welcome, if you want to spend an entire hour with me, you can book one of my sessions in the link in my bio of my Instagram. It's a shadow work session. It's all about boundaries and power struggles. And it looks like Brenda has already introduced that in. So with that, thank you guys so much for allowing me just to share what is a very personal journey for me. I've worked very hard to be in the sovereignty that I'm in, and it's honestly an honor to get to share this type of language with a community who's willing to receive it, because this type of work is going to change the world. So thank you for all the beautiful messages.
Oh my gosh, this was amazing. Wow. Our entire team had their hand raised. I love that. Can we all go ahead and take ourselves off mute, rub our hands together, and give Adrian a really, really, really big ashtahe.
Adrian, I love you.
Ashtahe.
Thank you, love. Amazing.
That was so dope.
Wow. So good. Amazing. And Adrian, I'll message you after. We have this online portal called the Sanctuary. We'll definitely have to invite you into that portal. This was so amazing and special. Thank you so much for being here. Wow. I love it. I'm so energized by that. I went through that entire scenario this weekend, and oh my God, biggest transformation ever. And this was so confirming for me. Yeah, it was so amazing.